Hey guys, I'm going to be doing a series of videos on your inner child and inner child healing work. So to start this off, first you have to meet your inner child. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is how to meet them and hear your inner child. Stay tuned. I'm Emily Goldthwaite. I'm an author, an energy healer, and I help people have powerful self-awareness, deep self-compassion, and expanded understanding. So growing up, everybody goes through different trauma and different levels of trauma. And when we have trauma as a child, a lot of times we are unable to fully process through it. We have to keep on moving through life, and we don't always have these tools or skills or the maturity to be able to look at it in an objective way or in a way that we can fully process through what happened to us. So what happens then is that part of our psyche or our emotional development gets stuck at that age, and it becomes what we call an inner child. As the term inner child would suggest, that part of your psyche and your emotional development does not grow up with the rest of you. So as your body and your mind and your ego continue to grow and mature into adulthood and learn healthy ways to manage life and process through things, the part of you that's stuck stays stuck. So whenever you have an event or a relationship or something that triggers that childhood trauma back up, you do not respond from the place you normally would to other circumstances. And therefore, a lot of times you're going to have like overreactions or less mature reactions than you normally would present to a problem or a situation. And the reason is because you're not your adult self in that moment. You are actually thrown back to that part of you that's stuck as a child. And for that child part of you, a lot of times it's as if the trauma is still happening and you're still stuck because it was never resolved the first time. So there are quite a few steps and angles to come at with healing an inner child wounding. However, the first step, and the one I wanted to talk about today, is the most basic of all, and it is called hearing your inner child. Hearing your inner child has to do with listening to yourself. Pretty simple. However, a lot of us don't do it. If you stop and you look at your inner dialogue, a lot of us, and maybe not all of us, but I've talked to quite a few people. I'm not the only one that has inner monologue going on here. When you stop and listen to your inner thoughts and the voice of your inner thoughts, what does it sound like? A lot of people have very self-deprecative talk inside their mind when they don't respond or react the way that they think they ought to or the way that they know they normally would. They'll be very hypercritical of their self and very demeaning and degrading and very sarcastic a lot of times, and just kind of berate that part of them that is not responding in an optimum way or the way that they feel would be optimum. So that's going to look like thoughts like, oh man, I'm so stupid. Why didn't I just XYZ? Or, oh, good job. You're really mature. Why did I act that way? Like, what's wrong with me? Those kinds of thoughts are actually berating what is most likely a wounded child part of you. And when you have that kind of negative self-talk and negative reaction, it shuts down and further exacerbates the divide between your adult psyche and the inner wounded child psyche. Now, sometimes, depending on the trauma and the level of our self-esteem and our self-concept, it's hard to love ourselves. Sometimes we are our worst critic. And so the first step in being able to hear your inner child and be able to meet them and understand who and what they are is you kind of have to pretend that it is not you. Now, yes, it is absolutely a part of you. It is you. But remember, it's a part of you that got stuck in childhood. So it doesn't exactly jive with the rest of your adult brain. Now, the reason this is a helpful tool to do is because if you can kind of make an imaginary separation in your mind between your adult self and this child reactive self, then what you can do is you can approach that child part of you as if it actually were a child. Now, as a grown-up, approaching a child, you're going to respond and react very differently to how a very little child responds versus how you would respond to an adult that's misbehaving and like not following social trends. Your language is going to be different. Your attitude is going to be different. And I find it is a lot easier for adults to have empathy, sympathy, and love, unconditional love for a child than it is for them to have an adult that's, say, misbehaving. So by creating this little imaginary divide, what that's going to do is that's going to create a safe space for your inner child to talk. Because what you want to do is you want to hear what they are trying to tell you. Just like any little child who's misbehaving and having a meltdown, sometimes it's because they're tired and cranky, but sometimes it's because something's hurting inside and they don't have the language to be able to tell you what's wrong. And so when you can get through their upset and their trigger and be able to have a discussion with them, you can figure out and discover and like put the clues together and figure out exactly what they're actually trying to express and what they're trying to say to you. And then you can work on problem solving it. But you can't solve a problem that you don't know is there. And so the first step and the first key to healing your inner child is to listen to them. And just like any child, if we are scolding them, berating them, being critical of them, or yelling at them, eventually that child's going to shut down and stop talking to you. And so as our adult psyche, our adult self berate these parts of us that we don't like because they aren't acting the way we think we should act, that shuts down that child part and they stop expressing what's actually wrong, where the hurt actually is inside. And remember, it's your hurt. It's not like it's some child out there. It's your hurt, but you're shutting down the part of you that couldn't communicate and tell you why you have this dysfunction or this disproportionate reaction in the first place. Traumas and emotional woundings are a very sensitive thing, especially for a child, and especially for a child that was not able to process it in the moment. That means they didn't have a safe space or help as a child to process it. And so it just got shoved down and kind of split off from the rest of your psyche. So if you become the adult that is being an unsafe space for yourself to talk to, that part of your brain isn't going to communicate with the rest of you what's going on and how you can help. So the first step to even discovering your inner child is to stop your negative self-talk. Even if some part of your mind thinks that's totally justified to have that opinion about yourself, stop berating yourself. When you hear that going on, when you catch yourself being critical or dismissive of your feelings or like mocking yourself, once you catch yourself doing that, stop yourself from doing that, because most likely that part is hammering some sort of wounding, whether it's a child wounding or an adult wounding, but most likely a child wounding. So stop your critical inner self-talk. So once you've stopped your negative self-talk, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to approach that part of yourself with the same level of care, tenderness, and compassion that you would approach a child who is having a difficult moment. And once you are in that space emotionally to really hear yourself, you're going to validate that part of yourself, that emotion, that action. Even if, like I said, another part of you disagrees, you're going to acknowledge that for whatever reason, even if it's no reason at all, that part of you feels that way. And it's okay that you feel that way. That part of you reacted that way, and you acknowledge that there's some hurt feelings that caused you to react that way, and it's okay to have hurt feelings. Now, for those of you who might be freaking out with, no, it's not okay, it's not right. This isn't saying that you condone the behavior and that this is the behavior you want. But in order to heal something, first you have to accept what is already so. If you are in denial of what is so, you can never heal it. It won't go away because it's there for a reason. And the reason is that there's something to examine and something to clean out and address. But like I said, you can't clean a room that you don't see as dirty. So once you've validated the action, the line of thinking, or whatever it is that's going on inside of you, listen and see if new thoughts come to your mind. Usually they're going to be a little bit quiet because just like a child who's been like in an unsafe environment to talk, it might take a while for that part of you to actually come forth with the information. Sometimes, depending on how badly you've shut down that part, it could take quite a while and several incidences to prove to that part of yourself that you're ready to listen with love and compassion for that part of you to actually come forth with the information about the hard or sad things that happened to you as a child. And once that part of you comes forth with that, whether it's in that moment or in a future moment, then if you don't have the tools to address it right then, the way you can close this up is to just kind of mentally like put your arms around yourself, like you're giving a little child a hug, and say, even though I have this issue, I still love and accept myself. Or even though there's this problem, or even though I feel this way, I love and accept myself. Now, sometimes your inner child doesn't see their reaction as a problem, and if you call a child a problem, they're not going to be very happy about it. But you have to be the gauge of that for yourself, to where you're not pronouncing a judgment on the child of yourself, your inner child self. You are actually validating that there's something hard that part of you is still dealing with, as if it's present, even though it's past. And that's one of the hardest things, because as our adult mind, we're like, oh, well, that happened a long time ago. It shouldn't still bother me. But if it was unresolved as a child, that part of you is still living it in real time. And so it needs to be addressed as if it's still happening and still real, because to some part of your mind, it is very real still. At this point in your healing, once you have met and heard your inner child and understand what they have to say, and maybe even some of the traumas that caused yourself to get stuck, you can take that to your healer and be like, here's my inner child part that I discovered. Here's what's going on. Here's maybe the trauma associated, or maybe your healer can help you figure out what trauma would cause that kind of a stuckness for your inner child, and work on healing it from there. So I hope what I've shared with you today is helpful in reaching that first step of discovering your inner child and having a deeper level of self-compassion. And when we have self-compassion, we have more compassion outwardly as well. That's it for today. I hope you found that helpful. If you did, go ahead and give it a like for me, and also subscribe to my channel, as well as leave a comment below, because I love hearing from you guys and corresponding. I'll be putting out videos like this every week to help people like you have light, love, and joy in your journey. Take care.